So, Anjum, welcome. And if we could start with you telling us a little bit about your background before AUR and what led you to Rome, and then we'll jump into the after.
Sure. My journey to Rome was perhaps, in a way, a second homecoming. So I did my undergrad. I did a double degree in archaeology and anthropology from Cornell University in the United States of America. I graduated in 2016, and because at that time I thought that I was going to make a career in archaeology, I made sure to cover Europe. And I actually did my first excavation in Naples. So I was in Italy in 2014 or 15, either of those 2 years. And I was able to visit Rome on one weekend. So I did get to explore the Eternal City. And it was at that time when the Trevi Fountain was actually being renovated. So when I went to visit, there were all these fences up and the waterworks were closed. And I got so disappointed that I didn't toss a coin in. But luckily, I think Neptune was feeling very indulgent towards me because I got a chance to come back and spent 15 months in Rome. So it was wonderful. So, I mean, I graduated in 2016 with my bachelor's, jumped right into a PhD program and realized that I really didn't like the fact that the program, especially the PhD in archaeology, was very narrow, a little too academic ivory tower. And after a term, I left, came back to Pakistan, jumped into a heritage conservation project in the historic city of Lahore. And I was back in Pakistan, sort of exploring what I wanted to do now that I realized that a PhD in archaeology was no longer what I wanted to do, when I came across the American University of Rome's master's program in sustainable cultural heritage, which funnily enough was forwarded to me by a professor at Cornell. So it seemed to be a very organic transition. I loved the diversity of courses. I loved the objective of melding classroom textbook knowledge with field experiences and practical marketable skills. And I applied, I got accepted, and that's how I came to be at AUR.
You. So can you give us an outline of your journey from graduation up until your current post?
So I got to experiment first at the Higher Education Commission of Pakistan, where I was special assistant to the chairman. And my role was very amorphous in the sense that I got to really create my job description. They spoke with me, they saw my resume, they were willing to give me a chance. And I was there for a 3-month internship where I was really involved in a number of different projects regarding policy implementation, restructuring from an internal and an external perspective, promoting young Higher Education Commission employees, trying to update their websites. It was really a very diverse project. I went and did a lot of personal projects regarding counseling. I started volunteering at the Cornell Alumni Admissions Committee, and I got to speak with a lot of young people who are applying to college. And all of that I found very relevant to the training that I had done at the Sustainable Cultural Heritage Master's course, because when we talk about heritage, usually people think of old buildings or artifacts or superficial cultural things like songs and dances and dresses. And really it goes much deeper than that. It's about how society dynamics are working, starting from what's up here in our minds to how that translates into action. And it was really this year that I got my first full-time job as communications officer at the Rural Support Programs Network, which is the largest network of development sector work in Pakistan. And I'm working at their flagship project, which is Success, or the Sindh Union Council and Community Economic Strengthening Support Program. And it's the largest women-led rural development project in Pakistan. And again, I'm involved in a number of different roles as communication officers there. So that's sort of my winding journey from AUR to where I'm currently at.
So if you can tell us a little bit about the project itself, a little more than what you just mentioned, and if there's anything in particular that you want to share about this project.
Sure. So Success is, as I mentioned, the largest women-led development venture in rural Pakistan. And there are a lot of big fancy words in that statement, which I'll break down momentarily. So when I talk about development or the development sector, the way it translates to in my project is uplifting people through a grassroots movement. And when we talk of a grassroots movement, especially at a societal level, it incorporates a network of different factors which are necessary for the overall health of a society. And that can include education. It can include the access of people to public services like health, hospitals, schools, human rights, women rights especially, nutrition, jobs, especially jobs, and other basic facilities like running water, roads, access to markets. All of that sort of forms the framework of this grassroots movement. And we have many different components which focus on building capacity at a grassroots level, because we're working with rural communities here. And the way rural communities translate in Pakistan's context, especially in the province of Sindh, where Success is being implemented, is that these people live in very harsh environments. They are often not able to reach the government, and the government is not able to reach them, which means that public services at a very basic level, running water. I'm not even going to talk about Wi-Fi. I know the UN has declared it to be a basic human right, but not everyone has that privilege. Access to roads, easy transport. Heck, the communities we work with have a social framework where women were not allowed to venture outside their immediate communities. So we're working with a very low baseline. And because our goal for this project was to promote women empowerment and reduce household poverty, it was necessary to first tackle the prevailing perceptions and conventions of the society, so that people would be open to be part of this project, as opposed to getting suspicious, wondering if we actually came with sincere intentions, or whether we would be projecting our own views of development on these people. And that happens very frequently, still does, unfortunately. I work as communications officer. I'm based in Islamabad. Our program districts, however, are based in Pakistan's southern province of Sindh. We implement our project in 8 districts, and the people who are on the ground, our field partners, are 3 rural support programs which have a very long history. They've been working in Pakistan since the 1980s, and they're really the ones that bridge that gap between rural communities and the local government.
And so now that the project has just done its 5th year, I mean, after the 6th, you say you have this 6th year to kind of understand a bit how its long-term viability, but is there at the moment a plan or an idea of what happens after the 6th year? Is it
sustainability was a part of our project goals since the inception of this program, and we've been monitoring sustainability since the beginning. So it's not something we're just coming around to thinking about. If that had been the case, it would have been some serious problems. So the way it works right now is that a lot of our project goals and milestones have been achieved. And we right now are at a point where we can really use the meticulous recording system that we've established to see what aspects of our program need a little adjusting or need more focus. So an example can be that we train women within the communities that we work with as community resource people.
Mhm.
And the community resource person, or the CRP, is really the link between awareness and empowerment that we wish to give to rural women. Our project does focus on rural women. So, I mean, it's not like we stay distant from men. It's just that the way the communities we work with are structured is that women are very marginalized and sidelined. So we want them to be the focus.
Mhm.
So the community resource person is a very essential asset to rural communities because they hold awareness sessions where women are given knowledge on the various social factors I was mentioning earlier, like women's rights, nutrition, women's health, environmental conservation, pollution, vocational skills training, which is very necessary because when I speak with our rural partners and ask them how things were before our project came in, the overwhelming answer is that we didn't know. We didn't know we had these rights. We didn't know we could do these things because for them, the norm was whatever limited role they had been given since birth. And now that they have been given the awareness and been organized into community institutions so that they have a unified voice for which they can advocate for themselves and their community, it's a real game changer for them. And for us at this point, it's important to see what particular challenges the community resource person faces in implementing her task so that we can include that in our final project here. We have, instead of a date, we have time periods which extends to several months where we'll be slowly building more capacity while pulling out, because our goal for this program was that rural women in the province of Sindh that have been empowered and unified should at the end of the day be confident enough to make their own decisions for their community. So we don't want it to be top to bottom. We don't want someone else coming in and telling them what to do. They should be aware and empowered enough to make their own life decisions, which to a great degree they are doing now, and it's very inspirational to see. Another thing I'd like to add, this is a little hush hush, so I don't tell anyone. We're having talks with our project stakeholders of maybe extending the success program beyond our final year in 2020 and 2021. So that the reason for that is so that we have more time to give the rural communities to stand on their own feet while we slowly take a back seat. So there are all these different factors that are playing in.
Just right after you joined as communications officer for the project, COVID hit.
Yes.
And so obviously this a conversation in this time of humanity has to at one point discuss COVID. So how did that impact your work? Did it I assume that it had obviously a lot of impact, but if you can tell us a little bit how that affected both the women in these rural community as well as your work in the office.
I joined in March 2020 when the COVID pandemic had broken out in Pakistan. It was a very memorable time to start a job. And funnily enough, I was able to squeeze in a field visit to Sindh while COVID was breaking out in Sindh. The province of Sindh was actually the place where COVID broke out in Pakistan. That was where it started. I was right in the thick of it. We had to cut our field trip short. We were actually there for a lesson learning and experience sharing workshop. And when we were constantly getting reports about how cases were rising, things were getting serious, and it got to a point where our head office in Islamabad told us to pull out. It was definitely a challenge. I luckily foresaw at the beginning that I would need to gain the trust of my field partners for them to send me data and for them to be willing to explore new communication strategies, because when COVID hit, we could no longer do physical in-person events, which was a major part of the communication strategy that we did for success. And I was this new greenhorn that was pushed into this situation where our communication strategy had to go very much to a digital level. And it was definitely a challenge, but this is where I'm so glad I had my training in archaeology and anthropology and heritage, because I understood that beneath the professional network that exists in any job or company is the human culture and the human relations. And if people don't pay attention to that, there's really no reason for there to be good camaraderie and good rapport amongst working colleagues. So, I mean, for me especially, it was very much a symbiotic relationship where I needed to gain the trust of my field partners, and it had to be done through a digital medium. We made our first in-house short film that we submitted to an international filmmaking contest, which is organized by Pakistan's media group, Dawn, and Germany's Deutsche Welle. We didn't get shortlisted, but there's always next year.
There's always Venice.
Yes, we should totally submit to the Venice Film Festival. Thank you. Thank you, Lara. I will tell my field partners about that. We also made a lot of short clips focusing on our rural women partners' testimonies, which in many ways was not, I think, given a lot of attention, because even though they were, the heralds and the beneficiaries of this program, a lot of times in the development sector and really in any international endeavor, there's an imbalance in media attention given to, say, people who are more established or countries that are more established than others. And I really wanted the focus to be on the women that we claimed we were helping so much. So to hear them speak on various national and international issues like COVID was a game changer, I think, because it shifts the perspective from something that is considered conventional to something that is different. So, you know, one of the recent communications thing that we did was getting featured at the C20 Civil Society Engagement Group of the Global Economic Summit, which was a huge deal for us. And I specifically asked my field partners if they could go and get footage of women discussing our webinar theme of accountability through digital governance. And the answers we got were phenomenally nuanced. And I think it just speaks to the fact that there's a lot of negative stereotyping regarding people who are not from an urban context. And this is something I get very passionate about when I speak on these issues. And it's something I really try to highlight is that, you know, people who live in rural areas are not stupid. It's not like they're living in, you know, a very simple pastoral symphony where they don't have to deal with intellectual or higher issues. And that video really did, I think, go a long way in projecting that. So yeah, that's another long-winded answer to your question.
Many times projects are focused on numbers and impact based on numbers. And at the end of the day, figures like yourself, Noah, communications officer, are pivotal to actually communicate the impact, which is usually much more narrative, with these wonderful women who speak super sure of themselves and actually know what they're talking about because they live in the community and they've experienced the impact brought by the project. So
yeah,
kudos. Bravo.
yeah.
Grazie.
In your panel, one of the ideas that, so the topic of the panel that you participated in was, the title was accountability through digital government, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And so an idea that is brought up in that is that a government's willingness to commit to change and to commit to accountability and to curb corruption is essential for the social and economic benefits that are proven to be kind of outcomes of this commitment to change. But it is the willingness to change that is necessary for this to happen, sort of as the stimulus for the benefits to come. And so that seems like a very top-down, you know, it needs to start at the top. That seems to imply that it needs to start at the top and trickle down. But the work that you are doing is kind of bottom up. You're working with the very communities and going upwards. So how do you see it as working? Do you think it is top down? Do you think it's bottom up? Or do you think it's kind of meet in the middle?
So for me, it's very much a middle way approach where it's not unilinear. It can't really be bottom up, top down. It's more of an interconnected mesh.
Mm.
And the way I see it, especially regarding the webinar theme at the C20 summit, is that I don't really think it's realistic to say that top down and bottom up is very successful in terms of inclusion and accountability, or even very sustainable. Because if we talk of just top down, that sounds dictatorial,
Yeah.
to me at least. And if we talk about bottom up, that sounds revolutionary in a negative way, because I'm thinking of the French Revolution. again, it's not sustainable. So either way, whether it's bottom down or top up, and
Top down, bottom up.
top down, bottom up, is that they're very extreme. They're not very nuanced. And I personally think that's a very unrealistic approach. So for the project that I do, or I am a part of, we want to bridge that gap between two entities which should be communicating more. The rural communities are not living in an environment and do not have the resources where they can connect with the government. Unfortunately, the government doesn't have the capacity to connect with them either. So, I mean, top down, bottom up won't even work in this scenario, because there's this
Disconnect.
there's this disconnect. There's a huge moat between these two parties, and we need to have some kind of bridge. And this is where we come in.
Mm.
And, if we were to talk about whether digitization itself can promote accountability, the way I see it is that digitization is a tool, it's a process. Does it promote efficiency? Oh, yeah. It definitely does. That's something my co-panelists made abundantly clear. Whether that necessarily promotes inclusivity and accountability really depends on how people are using it, because in the end, it's people who are designing and managing and implementing digitization. And we have countless examples of how digitization has been used to further some very devious and corrupt practices where people were not involved. I mean, one example is social media like Facebook, where people's private information was being given to different supervisory and government bodies without their permission. There was a huge scandal about this, and people had to be made accountable.
Well, you're doing well. You and the project you work for are making a huge impact, and it's inspiring, to say the least.
Thank you.
So, what would you say is the highlight of your master's degree in sustainable cultural heritage?
Oh, the people, definitely the people. It's something that AUR was actually quite crucial in teaching me, is that no matter what opportunity you get or where you go, if the community and the people don't value you or have your back, that opportunity becomes meaningless. And I was able to experience that firsthand at AUR because, well, I was a foreign student there. I wasn't from the European Union. I wasn't even from a first world developed Western country. And because I'm a national of Pakistan, which has a certain unsavory international reputation, I was open to, well, different events which I felt were discriminatory towards myself. And if I didn't have the support and the protection of AUR, I don't know what I would have done.
And whether it was inside the classroom or outside of it, during your 18 months in Rome, what was the most valuable thing you learned, or the most valuable experience that you gained?
Well, I would say Rome taught me to go for it and to try new things I'd never done before, or things I'd always wanted to do and had never had the chance. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that made my trip to Rome and, especially my time at AUR so special was that I was finally able to be part of my first Shakespeare performance. I was able to. I'm a huge Shakespeare fan. I love performance art, and I wanted to dabble in it while I was here. So I auditioned for Richard III, which was going to be done by the English Theatre of Rome. And I got to hear about that through AUR as well. And I got selected, which was amazing because, nobody really knew me. So I was quite the unknown factor. But yeah, I was able to do Shakespeare in Rome.
That's wonderful. And to finish it off, what is the place, person, or item that you most closely associate with AUR, looking back at your time here?
Oh my goodness, there isn't just one particular thing or item or person I associate with AUR, unfortunately. I mean, I think this again ties to what I learned about heritage at AUR is that, the past and the present and the future are not mutually exclusive boxes that have no linkages to each other. They're more of a spectrum. They bleed into each other and they continue to influence people at a conscious and a subconscious level. So, if I were to think about my time at AUR, I think about the Shakespeare performance play that I was able to be a part of. I think about the fact that I was finally able to learn a bit of Italian with Professor Marcella, who's just absolutely fabulous. I think about the time that I was able to have a long-awaited reunion with a very close friend of mine who I had not seen since 2016. She and I met at Cornell. She's from Zimbabwe, I'm from Pakistan. We hit it off in the US, very multicultural and international, very diverse. And I hadn't seen her since we had graduated. And then we were able to have our reunion in Rome, which was just the perfect place for us to see each other again. And I also, by chance met so many of my other friends and colleagues from Cornell who were in Rome, and we would just randomly come across each other at at a train stop or a bus stop, and I'd say, "Oh, all the roads do lead to Rome." This is so interesting.
It's true. It is true.
On a personal level, I also, connected with my current fiance while I was in Rome. So there are just so many associations.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, congratulations, and you do have to come back and visit.
I'm really looking forward to the time when I do get to retrace my steps and come back to the Eternal City.